Hello out there. My name is David Horton, and I'm proud to be one of the pastors at St. Luke's Methodist here in Houston. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you had a great weekend, and happy belated Juneteenth to you too. Friends, I'll be reading to you what I hope is a familiar story from the Gospels, and then I'll follow up with another story. So please hear the words of Jesus from Luke chapter 10. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these 3, do you think, was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." There was a protest 2 weekends ago in London, England, where things got ugly. Things turned violent really quickly. It was scary. A fight broke out between 2 groups of protesters. I'm sorry to say it was mostly white versus mostly black. And a white man fell to the ground, lying on the pavement, and he had a gash on his forehead. He was bleeding out. Not terribly, but not on the verge of death. But there was blood on the ground, and nobody had yet come in to help, even though there were crowds all around him. Well, a black man in the crowd named Patrick Hutchinson, he did something. He saw the white man laying on the ground, bleeding, wounded, and he did not pass by on the other side. What he could have done is assume that this man is somebody else's problem. Somebody else can save him. Or what he could have done is add to the injuries, beat him up some more. Why not? He deserves it. But Mr. Hutchinson took the third way. He hoisted the white man onto his shoulder, carried him to safety, made sure he was okay, took him away from the crowd. A picture surfaced of this event. You can look it up. You can Google it. And I think it's a picture of the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's almost a perfect picture of what it would look like for a Samaritan to be hoisting a Jew on top of his shoulder. See, what makes the parable of the Good Samaritan so powerful is that there were centuries of bad blood between Samaritans and Jews. To Jews, there was no such thing as a good Samaritan. And to Samaritans, there was no such thing as a good Jew. There's a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of mistreatment, a lot of injustice. It's one of the closest things in the Bible that we can look at and see what we would call racism. Jesus is telling a story that looks a lot like, well, the antidote to racism. See, what the Samaritan does is he doesn't assume that the Jew is somebody else's problem. Somebody else can save him. What the Samaritan does not do is add to the Jew's injuries. He deserves it. He takes the third way. He takes the neighbor way, the neighboring way. Jesus asks the lawyer who first came to Jesus and said, "Well, who is my neighbor?" He asks the lawyer, "Well, who was the neighbor here? Who neighbored?" Jesus turned neighbor from a noun into a verb. And what Jesus is doing, he's not just saying that neighboring means being nice to somebody, doing a good deed. It's more powerful than that. To neighbor somebody is to bridge the gap between divided people. Neighboring is the best weapon we have against racism. Neighboring is the best tool we have to bridge the gaps, the schisms between us. Neighboring is the way we move forward. Neighboring is the antidote to divisions in kinship. What Jesus does not do, never does, is just assume that you are somebody else's problem. He doesn't look at you and me and go, somebody else can deal with it. And what Jesus doesn't do, of course, is add injury to injury. Jesus neighbors. In this time in our culture, when things are turning upside down, some things for the good, don't assume this season is somebody else's problem, or that you can just add injury to injury. Go and neighbor. Go and neighbor like the Samaritan, like Mr. Hutchinson, like Jesus. Go and do likewise. Amen.